right, good morning, guys. I think we're going to get going. It's now 3 minutes past 10, and we've got a few people dialing in still, but we'll get going anyway. So I've unmuted all of you guys, so you guys are more than welcome to chat. You're more than welcome to ask questions. Today's session is about looking at your business strategically and how to revive your business post the COVID-19, I suppose, coma we've all been in. The question I asked Henk, I think this morning or yesterday was, is it still relevant right now to talk about the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic? And I think the answer is definitely a yes still. While we are back at business, while we are working towards growing our businesses, I think there's still a definite lag in the market, and I think we can all feel that. And Daniel and I were talking a little bit earlier, and it's not the case that your customers or your clients don't want to buy from you or don't need your services. It's actually more a case of there's less buying power in the market at the moment. So people can't either afford to spend money, or they're very hesitant to spend money right now because they're not quite sure where the market's going, where their businesses are going. So we have to find a way of rethinking, of repositioning up our companies and identifying potentially new gaps in a market that's already quite saturated. Because a saturated market tends to lead to a pricing war, and pricing wars are never good for the smallest competitors, which generally means that as small business owners, we are the ones who get knocked the hardest. Because big corporates can absorb some costs, we as small business owners tend to take that knock more heavily. A quick reminder of today's session. So as OptiGrowth, we decided to start out with a check-in session pre the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown, as a way of sharing relevant information, talking about business, helping business owners share some thoughts and ideas about what to do during the pandemic. And it seems to have worked quite well. It seems that we've hit quite a nice little rhythm and routine, and definitely shared some useful information with a lot of our clients and non-clients as well. A reminder, we also do have a shared folder. So while we are heading out of this pandemic sort of realm, there is still required information and need for information with regards to something like UIF, with regards to what your requirements are to getting your business going. But you can also find our videos and our links to videos on our YouTube channel as well. So we removed a lot of the videos from the shared folder. So if you'd like to go back and have a look at some of our discussions and some of our presentations previously, you can go to our YouTube channel and have a look. And if you like it, subscribe and like our YouTube channel as well. We've also shared this link with our groups. So there's a returntowork.co.za readiness plan or preparedness plan, which business owners need to have a look at if you want to open your company to the public or even to your employees. So one of the key things to remember is that while we are relaxing our lockdown levels, there's still a need to be safe and secure. And this pandemic has not hit its peak yet. So there's definitely another wave coming still. If not a new wave, the wave is still going as well. So we have to be consistent and consider the fact that we are still at risk to get this virus. And we need to make sure that our staff and our customers are safe when they deal with us. All right. I think because of our discussion today, and we bring this up pretty much every week, we have to remember where we are as a business. So if we can't identify our maturity as a business, we won't know where to start from. So doing a bit of a self-assessment and understanding where we are sitting at the moment, we can then better understand how to look forward. We can better understand what strategies and plans I put in place now to grow my business, to start growing that value of my company. So there are 4 stages with any real business. There's a startup phase, which is all about survival. There's a lifestyle phase where you can make your business all about you and supporting what you want as a person or as a personal entity. So your business supports that. Then there's when you start putting in the fundamental structures of scaling and growing, you start building a scalable entity, and that means you're ready to grow and optimize your business. So you start looking for efficiencies, you start looking for more defined management processes, you start looking at delegation of tasks, delegation of work, appointment of staff. And a nice test to do for yourself is, if you're thinking in a scalable position, ask yourself the question: can I grow can I support my business if it had to grow by 5 or 10 times? If I can't, it means I'm more than likely not in that point right now where I am scalable. So I've got to start working that scalability growth as well. And then lastly, when we are scalable, when we've reached that point where we now start having freedom, where we start having a choice of what we want to do in our company has then hit a sellable state, which means we don't have to sell it, but we now have the option to decide how we want to do. We can either sell, we can exit, we can carry on working, we can hand over to a generation of managers and upskill and bring people through the company ranks and take a more back-seated seat in our business. which means we then have the ultimate freedom. We have the ultimate choice of how we want to do it. Of course, the problem with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown is that while probably most of us are sitting in a sort of lifestyle, comfortable place in our business, not that I think entrepreneurs are ever comfortable, but while we're sitting in a more sort of relaxed state and knowing our businesses are going, I think a lot of us have been pushed back into that startup phase and that survival phase again. So we have to consider now that we are in that point. How do we reassess? How do we relook? And where do we go to now? We also believe that there are 8 key elements or 8 key factors to any business that we have to consider when looking at what's happening in our company. And those factors are financial management. So how do I look at my planning, right? So financial management will include things like your bookkeeping, your accounting. How do we look back into history? How do we see what we've done? How do we get good data about how businesses has operated and performed, and did that business model work? And then we've also got to look forward and start looking at the financial aspects of where am I going? What am I doing? Can I afford it? Does this business model work? If I achieve these targets, do I understand my break-even points? Because if I don't have the information on hand, how do I know how I'm achieving or where I'm moving to as well? Once you've got that in place, things like scalability comes into effect. So how do I grow? Can I identify key revenue streams that I can push fast, that I can grow by 10 times quickly? Can I identify which ones are the easiest to sell and how to push them forward? And again, then going back to my financial planning, do I know what those targets are to achieve those revenue streams and what I want to achieve in those? We look at risk, which is all about how do I mitigate the risk of the 3 key areas of my business: my customer, my supplier, my employee. So what that means is if I'm focused on one big customer, one key supplier, one key employee, and that customer either drops me, the supplier either ups their pricing or goes bankrupt, or my employee decides to move on or gets sick or wins the lottery and leaves me, what state's my company going or will my company be in? So I've got to make sure that by mitigating the requirements of one key customer, one key supplier, one key employee, I'm able to mitigate a risk of really losing sight of where I'm going. Cash flow, I think we all can understand. It's effectively the biggest point here is, do I have cash available? Can I spend money? Right? Because if I don't have cash, I can't obviously spend it. If my bank balance is zero and there's no access to funding, what do I do next? So cash flow, managing your cash flow is vitally important. Recurring revenue is about putting together a predictable income stream. And how do we develop that? How do we make sure we've got long-term contracts, long-term work to make firstly my selling a lot easier, but also how to build a continuous flow of money through the bank? Do I know how to differentiate myself from my competitors? So can I look at my competition? Can I identify what my competition is doing? And can I stand out from the crowd? So we mentioned earlier that the fact is that because our customers have less buying power, there's far more supply than there is demand for products, which generally tends to push down your pricing. One way to avoid pricing decreases is by making sure that you are differentiated and people can understand, or your customers can understand, the value you're offering rather than the price you're charging. The next one is customer service. So how do I build a good solid base of customers who are actively referring my business to their clients and to their family and friends? And can I try and drive that harder? So do I do assessments of my market? Do I do assessments of what my customers are thinking? And do I take that feedback back into my business and start planning on how to improve that as well? Because if your customers don't buy into you, your business tends to also take a bit of a knock as well. And the last one is, can I remove myself from the business? What's my plan for building a company structure where I can have a succession plan in place and effectively have an exit plan in place? So today we're talking very heavily on how do I build a business where I can start looking at the succession plan, looking at my exiting plan, and how do I put the building blocks in place now to start building towards that? Because if I don't plan for it, the chances are I won't know when I get there either. All right. Any questions so far? Anyone want to add any comments to the slide? Nope. I think we've discussed this in some detail as well, but I thought it was good to add this slide. And again, we have to consider the fact, and I know people are probably getting irritated with this whole discussion about the new normal and paradigm shifts, and there's no looking back and no going back to where we were. We've got to change going forward. But I think it's still good to understand that these things happen in life and they happen in business. The only constant in any business is change. So all that the coronavirus pandemic and this lockdown's done is it's essentially fast-tracked or fast-forwarded the need to implement a fundamental change to most businesses. Relook at your business model, relook at your offering, understand how do we become more intelligent or more current with regards to where we are within our industrial revolutions. And there's a very well-known fact or study where South Africans particularly were very much behind the developed worlds with regards to the industrial revolutions we have already. So as an example, how many of you were using Zoom as a means of having meetings as part of the Internet of Things revolution, the third industrial revolution, before the pandemic? And think about how relevant and how easy and how different our lives will be now, because Zoom will become the new normal of how you meet. Having a face-to-face meeting with a customer or a supplier is pretty much frowned upon now. So we are forced to go into the Zoom thing. So the uptake now and the push now to drive technology, to drive a different way of doing things is vitally important. And to understand that obviously makes your business operation a lot smoother and a lot better as well. All right. Today's discussion is all about understanding your strategic position. So while we talk about you need to understand where you're going, you need to understand where you are, we also have to look at why we started our companies. So what are we doing right now? What was the intention behind starting our businesses? And can I start looking at maybe redirecting, replanning, and almost re-energizing the desire or the need to grow that business? As entrepreneurs, as business owners, we tend to enjoy the struggle. We tend to want to struggle in our business. I say want very loosely, but I think we are prepared for that struggle. We're excited about the fact that we can control our own destinies. The question now will be is where do we focus our attention and where do we push our attention to? So understanding your business's strategic position in your markets is vital to knowing where do I focus, what do I do, and where do I push that forward to. And I think this coronavirus pandemic has definitely reinforced that understanding or reinforced the need to relook at where our businesses are going to and how we actually fit into our markets. All right. So before we start looking at exactly what it means to have a strategic vision, a strategic position, we have to consider why we started. So if we don't know why we started our businesses, if we don't know what the end result was going to be of our starting a company, how do we know when we've reached that point? How do we know when we're ready to exit? Because if we don't know that point, the chances are we'll be stuck in our companies, and more than likely we'll probably hold our businesses back. So we have to get that thinking back of at what point do I leave? At what point do I sell? At what point do I hand over? And at what point can I get to that point where I can hand over? Because when I get there, I want to make sure, firstly, I'm ready for it. Because if I'm not ready for it, it takes longer to get there anyway. And secondly, I want to be able to identify it as well. But again, as business owners and as people who like to get stuck into what they're doing, we tend to always look at the now and maybe the next step and not the 5-year or the 10-year plan going forward. So having that exit plan is something we have to consider. And I think as business owners, we have to ask ourselves, what is that point? What is the point where we can start looking at the what ifs, and when this happens, and when this happens, I'll do this, right? And I think by reassessing that, we can maybe get a better idea of at how we will look at that point later. All right. A reminder, and I think this is something that we tend to forget quite often, and we get stuck in the trap of thinking we are just doing work. As a business owner, we wear 3 hats. We have 3 different responsibilities in the company. We're a shareholder, firstly, and that shareholder holding is all about ownership of the business. We're looking at as a shareholder at increasing our share value. So if I'm invested money into my company or I put money into the business, I want to get something in return for that. I want to grow my share value, grow my wealth, and understand that there is opportunities to earn dividends or to earn money and wealth from the selling of shares in my business. And that as a shareholder is your only focus. What is the return that my company can bring me? So when we ask the question about what is that exit plan, there's gonna have to be consideration about what will my company hold as a value and what will my company be valued at when I get to that point. Because I need to sell it for something. I need to get something out of it more than just a salary every month. The next hat we wear is that of a company director. So a director on your board or a director of a board is responsible for driving the strategy, driving the vision, and driving the implementation of your company policies into your business. They're not there to do the grunt work. They're not there to turn the screwdriver, essentially. They are there to make sure that the vision and the direction of the company is relevant to getting the shareholders the maximum wealth and maximum return on the investments. Once they've defined that strategy, you then become an employee where the only goal and the only purpose of that employee is to deliver to that strategy. So most of us in our companies, we tend to be a shareholder, a director, because we're defining strategies, and we also are the employee because we're delivering work and delivering to the company's direction and vision as well. And a lot of business owners tend to get stuck in that employee phase and not take a step back and say, as a director of this company, what do I want to achieve, And as a shareholder, what is my long-term need and my long-term requirements with regards to wealth generation, but also potentially profitability and the paying out of dividends. All right. So today's discussion again looks at you as a shareholder right now and understanding what you want to do at the end of your business lifespan. So one thing about being a business owner is we all are chasing that freedom. We all want to try and find the freedom that being a business owner gives you, and that means, and as OptiGrowth, one of our key functions and key deliverables is we want to give business owners the control. And once you have the control to run your company and do what you want to do, you should then have freedom to choose where to next. And once you've got that freedom, the next natural progression is I can start growing, either taking longer holidays, I can invest money or invest shares or invest time into other things. And effectively, that growth gives me the opportunity to look at broadening my wealth or just my health as well. So we are all chasing that freedom. We're all chasing the idea of how do I implement and establish control of a business, and how do I then remove myself to some extent to make sure I can put time and effort into other things as well. So that's to do that, you have to consider, is my company sellable right now? Because if it's not sellable, I have very little options. So if it is sellable, the options I do have available to me are things like I can sell the company, so I can take and dilute all my shares, sell out and get some wealth and some cash flow or cash into my personal pockets. I can either scale. So if it is sellable, it means that I can rapidly grow as well. Because remember, as part of our 4 stages of a business, scalability comes before sellability. What that means is if I am sellable, I can probably grow it further. I can probably hit the market harder, or I can adapt to a new market and scale my business rapidly. I can pass it down. So I think a lot of us as business owners tend to look at our businesses as a legacy item, something to leave to our kids, something to leave to the next generation of managers, something to build on and to almost put our name against it to say this was mine and I started it. So at this point, if you're sellable, you can pass your company down far more effectively, and you can hand down a business that is running and operating and with the potential of growing more post you in the business. Or I can take a step back and I can be the chairman of the board. So I can still define where the company is going, I can still define the vision, and I can work with a bunch of directors or a bunch of strategic-minded people who will help me to develop and strategize where to next for the company. So you can see being sellable doesn't necessarily mean I've got to get rid of my shares. It just means I have the option to choose which direction to take as an individual. All right, so how do I know if my business is ready to sell, or why should I sell? Right? Should I sell? Shouldn't I sell? And one way of doing that is taking a look at what strategic buyers would look at in your business. Now, a strategic buyer is somebody who's looking to acquire a business or acquire a market or acquire a revenue stream that they can't currently get to. So if we look at strategic buyers, they will be the type of person or the type of entity that doesn't have the capacity or the time to go and redevelop or to develop a market they're not currently playing in. So what they tend to do is they tend to want to look at a business that's already established, has a good market reputation, has a good customer base, and they want to buy out that market from you. And they tend to offer a premium to what a normal buyer would do. So if you've ever been part of one of our group masterminds, you'll remember that the valuation of a business is very much determined by a willing buyer and a willing seller. You can do all the accounting work you want to, all the balance sheets, tests, all the ratios you want on earth, but it effectively comes down to how much is somebody willing to pay for your business and how much are you willing to sell it for. Now, a strategic buyer tends to add a premium, as in they tend to pay more or value a company more because it means they don't have to put the work into to operate in that market or to start that market again. And remember, when you start any business, like we know, it takes a while for that business to kick off. So for a strategic buyer, it's all about having quick access to a market, quick access to a potential revenue stream as well. So if you look at your business from that strategic position of what will a buyer who wants my market pay for my business, the chances are you will very quickly identify where I need to move to next. And by identifying where I need to move to next, I can start planning on what that next move is. So if we use an example of the COVID-19, where the market is saturated with people who are currently playing at your competitors, the question will always be, how do I start looking at moving myself away from being another person or another business in that market? So we start looking at not what do I buy and sell, or what do I sell as products and services, more about why is my customer buying from me? So why will my customer look at me as OptiGrowth, and why will OptiGrowth be important to what my customers want? And can I differentiate the idea of pulling a market together. So if I'm just cost focused, the chances are I'm stuck in a market where there's massive competition, and the chances are, like I said earlier, a small business tends to lose out because they can't carry the cost of underselling themselves. So the bigger companies will always take control and will always be able to absorb that cost again. To differentiate your market then as a means of going forward is good, but it doesn't mean you are playing in a different space. It doesn't mean your customers are really looking at you as the standout or the go-to person, particularly in a saturated market. We've got to then understand that our customers are buying a uniqueness of ours, not a different service or different offering. And that's why when we start looking at strategic buyers, what strategic buyers will look at is, how do I find a company that operates in a niche market? Now, for those of you who don't know what a niche market is, a niche market talks about a very limited supply of a particular item or particular service or particular offering, and it looks at a very small, defined market that very few competitors play in. Now, most of you will probably be thinking that how do I develop a market right now that is niche, and how do I start standing out from the crowd? It technically will start with understanding what your differentiator is, what my unique value proposition is. Because once I identify that unique value proposition, the question will be is, can I start edging out a market where I am one of the few, not one of the many, who offer this type of service or this type of offering? Because when I do that, the market that a potential buyer will look at buying is very clear and set out. Now, by doing that, you've got to do things like market assessments and market planning. I've got to understand how much value there is to a market, what the spending power of that market is. So by looking at your business objectively now and starting to push your strategy forward, you can very quickly start determining your own value to the company as well. So again, why do we look at a strategic buyer as somebody who we need to identify, or we need to look at our company as a strategic buyer? Is because we want to start focusing on areas where I can play as an individual and where somebody wants to buy me out. All right. So it helps me get a lot more focus on where I'm going. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but I definitely feel as a business owner myself that when the pressure of a pandemic comes along, when the pressure of cash flow, when the pressure of trying to find new customers and not making sales because the market's not buying, we tend to lose sight of the bigger picture sometimes. We tend to focus on the small aspects and try and get the small things done rather than remembering where we're heading to. So by identifying what a strategic buyer would want to purchase and why they purchase from me, I can then start redefining my focus and my strategies around what attention is needed in either my products, my services, or the market I need to develop. So now is probably a really good time to have a look at what your market's doing, to have a look at where your business is, and to start thinking about how to push that forward and how to start building that strategy. Because again, you can't just stop what you're doing now. You've got to start planting the seeds and building those foundations for that new business or that new idea you want to push out. The next thing is you are far more objective about your business. And by being objective, you effectively are removing the emotional attachment you have to your company. So a lot of us tend to be very, I suppose, attached by the hip to our business. So we want our business to be part of who we are and to represent who we are and to be part of the Damion Stander brand of things. But we've got to start removing ourselves so that we can objectively view without an emotional tie to it of what's best for the business. Because what's best of how I feel about something might not be best for the business. I also have business partners, and most of us, I would think, have at least one or two other stakeholders or partners in our business who also have their own needs and desires. So by removing yourself from an emotional tie to the company, we can be far more objective about where we have to go, and we can articulate these plans, and we can talk about these plans together with a board, with a shareholders sort of forum, or just on your own. So talking to your wives, your partners, or your business coaches, you can have a far more conducive discussion about what's happening with my company and where it's going. The last thing is, once we have that idea and we've assessed the market objectively, we can then start putting our sort of direction in place. We can start planning on what that route is we need to travel. And once we identify that, and once we know what the end destination is going to be, we tend to be able to make better decisions about where we're going to be going. So I always use the sort of analogy of, if I want to drive from Cape Town to Johannesburg, I know my starting point and I know my end point. The question will be, how do I get there? What is the timeline for me to get to Joburg? Is it 1 day? Is it 2 hours? Is it 3 months? So if I understand the sort of criteria of how I want to get there and the conditions of getting there, I can start planning better of the route I'm going to take as well. So as an example, if I need to get to Joburg in 2 hours, the only option I have really is to fly there, right? If I can take a day or two, my options become a lot more broader. I can either fly, so I can take my time to get ready and to, go to the airport, go have a coffee at the airport, and then fly for 2 hours and get there nice and relaxed. Or I can choose to drive there, take a bit of a trip, and get in your car and drive out the long road and take a nice drive to Joburg. If it's 2 days, I can take a drive, stop off somewhere, have a cup of coffee, have a sleep over, visit family and friends. But again, by setting the end goal, by understanding the end destination, I can start planning on how I'm going to get there and start adapting my route according to the plan I've got. And I think that's what we as business owners, and particularly if we look at ourselves only as employees of the company, working day in and day out and not taking a step back, we tend to lose sight of that direction. We tend to lose sight of the what's coming next in our business. All right. Any questions yet on these points? Am I talking too fast? Am I talking rubbish? Nope. Cool. All right. So when we talk about that end destination, the question you should be asking yourself is, do I have an exit plan? Do I know what that exit plan looks like? Because if I know what that is, the chances are I can then move more rapidly, I can plan more decisively, and I can tend to have a better understanding of when I get there. So if I use the same analogy of that Joburg trip, if I don't know Joburg is the end result, and I don't know that Joburg is where I want to be at the end of my journey, the problem is I may drive past Joburg, right? I may run out of fuel getting there. I may not reach Joburg and never know why I ever didn't get there. So the question will always be, what does my end result look like? What does Damion Stander's end game plan look like? Because my business has to help me get there. So if I know where I want to go, and I know my co-partners, the shells want to go, the chances are I can use my business to drive to that, or use my business as a driver to get to that result. So you always tend to think about the end before you start doing something. So for those of you who are married, you more than likely would have a contract of sorts, a prenup of sorts that talks about if you get divorced, what happens then. So even before you get married and there's lots of love and emotion, you've got to be clinical and talk about the what ifs, and if this ends, what does that end look like? And your business is no different. We have to understand, what if I get to a point and that point is either my end or my business partner's end, or something happens. What happens at that end of the road for me? And if I know that end again, there's a very good chance I can start planning on how to get there. So if I use a more relevant example, I work with my parents. My parents tend to, not tend to, that my parents are older than I am. I still have quite a long business career ahead of me. They probably want to start looking at retiring or slowing down or something. And as a partner to the business, I have to firstly understand that, but they also have to, in return, understand that there's got to be a point past their slowing down or past their retirement. So together as a shareholder team or as a shareholder forum and as a board of directors, we've got to talk past that point and to that point of when they decide to slow down. Because there's no way as Damion Stander can operate the business by himself. So when do we bring on new partners? When do we bring on new associates? When do we bring on new employees? And when do we start the succession plan of pushing Henk and Barbara, it sounds terrible, but pushing them out of the business and bringing people on board to try and work with us and build the company? And does that mean selling shares? Does it mean making them more sort of strategic partners and not operational partners? And those sort of discussions about where our business is going tends to also help define at what point do they need to have the security that the business can support them as well. So again, when we look at strategic buy, going back to that discussion, if I know that I need to build for a particular market, a particular type, I now first know what that market looks like, understand what OptiGrowth as a business has to achieve, and I can start planning for that scenario of in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time, whatever that period would be, I need to be at this point. So I've given myself the direction, I've given myself the target and the goal to hit. I now also have a timeline in place, which means I've got a certain amount of I wouldn't say security, but I've got a certain amount of planning that has to take place to get to that point as well. And if I get there sooner or later, at least I know I'm either on track or I'm way ahead of track or way past track, which again means that those critical discussions about am I doing the right thing can happen on a far more consistent basis. So in year 1 or year 2 or year 3, we can know are we on track or not. We can adjust our planning if we need to. We can change direction if we need to as well. And I think that's what the coronavirus and this pandemic has really brought to the foreground. Is a lot of business owners don't know what that looks like. A lot of business don't know how to adapt or how to reassess their business and push their businesses forward to try and make that change or to be that change in their business as well. Does that make sense so far? The next question, or the one thing that
perfectly, Damion. Thanks.
All right. The next step and the next thing to consider is, what if I get an offer from my company? So I don't know how many of you have received an offer to purchase or have received some form of discussion around, would you sell your business for X amount of money? And the chances are, if you have, you probably haven't had an idea of what my company is worth. So by putting that end result down, by understanding where I want to be in my business, if that offer comes early, if that offer comes to me, I at least know what my yes or no answer would be. As an example, if Damion Stander right now can get 40 million rand for OptiGrowth as his share contribution to it, which would be amazing, I will say take it, and I would run away with that 40 million, pay my capital gains tax, and probably put the money into an investment account and just have a bit of fun my life for the next few years. But there's got to be a value to it. There's got to be some sort of connotation of, at this point, I'm willing to look at a seller. The next point is, if your competitors are looking, or if you're looking at your competitors, the chances are you can also see where they're playing at. You can see how they're playing. You can see what they're doing, and you can start using it to your advantage. Now, why is that possible, right? How do we understand what our competitors are doing? Well, more than likely, they will tell you. So your competitors will be very, very clear on the fact that they are doing well, that they've got good customers, that they're doing this new thing and they're doing this new idea, and they will tell you where they're going. Just look at their websites, look at their testimonials, look at their news briefs, and you can very quickly see how your market's starting to adapt or starting to move, and use it to your advantage. So if they go in one direction and they are very good at what they're doing, either jump onto the bandwagon and better it, because there's nothing wrong with doing that, or look for another channel or another direction that you can still play in the same market but offer something that's either complementary or something that's completely different. So identifying what your competitors are doing is also a good space to look at them as a strategic buyer. Right? Now, I know that might not make sense, but the person you want to look at to buy your company out could end up being somebody who competes with you. Because like I said, when we look at a strategic buyer, we're looking at somebody who wants to purchase a market or wants to purchase a customer base and a revenue stream that they don't want to develop themselves. So by looking at my competitors, especially if they're bigger than I am, by looking at where they're going and what they're doing, and building a supplementary market or supplementary revenue stream could be to my benefits in the long run as well. All right. Okay. So if we have an exit plan, right, it's not good enough just to think about the fact that I have an exit plan, I know what I want to achieve, I know where I want to go. There's got to be a few things we have to consider. So firstly, as from a business aspect, I've got to know what my business is worth. I've got to understand what value I need to get to if I want to sell my company that will make Damion Stander happy as a part of the OptiGrowth shareholder team, right? So by knowing the business value, by understanding how that valuation is set, I have a far better idea of what buttons to push and what directions to take if I want to get to the point of selling. Of course, if I understand my valuations, I've got to understand what is my specific business value proposition, right? And what is the position in the marketplace? And what that means is I've got to understand either, hopefully, what my niche is, or I've got to understand what my differentiator is from my competitors. What makes me different, and what makes my market different? What makes my market difference to push? Yeah, what makes my market difference to want that strategic buyer to buy me out, or to want that person to come and look at me and say, "I like what you're doing. Can I get this from you, please?" Right? To understand that, then, and to understand your business value, we have to understand our financial metrics. So we've got to make sure that our financials are in order, because we firmly believe that the spine of any business will always be your financial management processes. You've got to understand, firstly, what your costs are. You've got to understand what your break-even points are. And you've got to be able to show your plan going forward in some form of financial assessment. So I've got to see revenue growth. I've got to see expense declines. I've got to see profit potentials growing as well. And I've got to make sure that I can adjust that and prove that accordingly. Because the more I can prove that, the less risky my business becomes, and the more I can add the value, because a buyer will have to do less to break the business effectively. Any buyer looking at your company will want to walk into a business that's already operating, already showing profits, and he has to do very little to keep the business going as well. The last part that we tend to forget about quite a lot as business owners, because we're not accountants, we're not tax practitioners, is we don't tend to understand the tax ramifications, firstly, for the business. So if I start making profits, what does that mean from a tax perspective? but also in our personal capacity, what does that mean from a tax perspective as well? So any of you who've bought or sold shares in a company will remember that when you sold those shares, there's more than likely going to be a capital gains or capital gains tax element to it as well, which means that the day or the minute that sale goes through, you are liable to pay a percentage of that money you've made out of that sale to SARS. Now, when you start structuring a sale agreement, a lot of investors will tend to do a partial payment or a periodized payment of to you. Now, SARS and the taxman don't see it that way. They see it as the sale was made on day one, and therefore you owe me that money within that tax period. So, considering the tax ramifications of the business and of that sale, we are far better positioned to then make a decision on how we want to sell, when we want to sell as well. We've moved away from the business aspect now. We talk about your personal life. We've got to understand that we cannot personally attach ourselves to the business. Now, what that means is if I've got a lifestyle business, my business supports my lifestyle, I've got to start showing that I'm a separate entity of the business. I can't start drawing directors' remuneration fees and a few expenses from the business here and there. I've got to literally remove myself emotionally and financially from the business and show myself as an individual entity away from the company as well. I also have to understand my personal value to it as well. So I've got to understand, am I ready to leave? Right? Am I ready to look at the next chapter of my life away from my company? Do I want to do that? And how does that look? Is it a full detachment? Is it a partial detachment? And then what comes next to my life? Many business owners tend to sell out their companies and sit at home and get bored. And in my opinion, if you don't keep busy, you tend to die as well. You die quickly. So most older, sound terrible. Most older generational folk tend to get very bored in their retirements and tend to start losing sight of enjoying life as well. And a lot of us tend to enjoy doing business as well. So what comes next? What comes after that sale? What comes after that complete detachment from your business? And by having that plan in place, you can then start looking at, can I afford that lifestyle? Can I afford that next stage of my life as well? And then it comes down to financial. So do I understand my personal portfolio? Do I know what expenses I currently have? Do I know what my personal budget looks like? And can my lifestyle be afforded post that business venture, post that sale? And how much do I then need to support that lifestyle? I don't know if you guys have ever heard the term the value of money. So as what R1 million today, for example, is not worth R1 million in 10 years' time, right? And that's due to things like inflation and currencies and exchange rates and all those great things. But effectively, R1 million today is not worth R1 million in 10 years' time. And I need to understand that if I'm looking at retiring from my business, so if Damion Stander decides to retire next year because he gets a great offer of 40 million, that 40 million will not be worth 40 million when I'm 60, or will be worth 40 million when I'm 70. So I need to make sure I understand what that value looks like. I need to make sure I understand that what I do with that money has to support a lifestyle that I need to grow old to, right? Otherwise, I need to go back and find a new bit of work or start a new company, do a few investments. And can that lifestyle then be worked with as part of the spend or the money I've got out of the company? And that then talks to your investment portfolio. So before you start selling, before you start looking at getting out of your business, the question will always be, can my business or does my personal investment portfolio look at how I can survive post that? All right. I know we're talking a lot about exiting your business, but again, if we don't talk and understand what that looks like, the question will always be asked, how do I get to that point? And if I don't know how to get to that point, the chances are I'm either not ready for it or my business can't help me get there. Because my business can't help me get there, then why am I in the position I am right now? Why am I working so hard on something that potentially has no end in sight, that potentially has no reward at the end of the road? And I think that's why when you look at your exit plan and the strategic position of your company, it starts putting just those little thought processes and those little building blocks in place. The question you should be asking yourself now is, cool, that's awesome, that's great information, great theory, very clever, but how do I go about doing it now? And the only way that we as OptiGrowth see it working is you've got to do a
government, dan kan jy dit verstaan.
Yeah, there's a bit of a government talk there. So we have to understand where we are right now. So we've got to do a benchmark right now of firstly, what does our market look like? What does our business look like? And where do we see that going? So by doing like you would a fitness test, understanding my current position, my current fitness level, I suppose, and putting a plan together of how to change that is the starting point. And the question that you need to ask yourselves at the moment is, do you as a business owner have a growth plan? Do you know what your business needs to achieve? Do you know where your critical areas of focus are? Because if you don't, you're already on the back foot. You're already in that position now of not potentially being ready, not potentially understanding at what point my business will be working towards it. And again, the question we all ask ourselves at the moment, is planning really relevant at this point in time? I can't control the market. I can't control what government's going to be doing as part of the lockdown process. But what I can do is I can plan my own destiny. I can plan my own way of getting out of it. And I can start adapting that plan. Because remember, with every plan, you can always make changes and adaptations to it. The only constant in business is change. There's no, I mean, even out of a pandemic, even out of lockdown, the only constant in business is change, and there are macroeconomic factors and environmental factors that we can't control anyway. The question will be, is my plan flexible enough, and is my plan workable enough to get me to that endpoint to where I'm able to exit my business? And do I have an exiting strategy? As in, how many years from now? How long do I have? What does that endpoint look like? All right. If you guys do want to talk about benchmarking a bit more, you're welcome to give either Henk and I a phone call, and we can spend about an hour just looking at a very good benchmarking tool we've got and show you how to do that as well. All right. And then I think the next part is obviously once you start looking at your benchmarking, once you know what you want to do, the question will be, how do I turn it around? So how do I take my business now in the state it's currently in, more than likely taking a step back into that survival phase, not a lifestyle phase, and how do I turn around these strategies? How do I put these things into work? And the only answers we have is with speed, right? So we've got to make sure that we have a plan in place and we can implement it quickly. Because if you wait too long, more than likely your competitors start doing it before you do, which means you're already on the back foot. You've got to do it with intent, right? And you've got to be committed to that strategy. So you've got to be focused on what you're doing, and you've got to make sure you start moving. So if I don't have the speed of choices, if I don't have the intent behind my strategy, I lose focus of where I need to go. And it also means I can't adapt that strategy, that plan to any changes in the potential macro environment. I need to be transparent. So we all have partners, either business partners, life partners. We all have stakeholders to our business, people who are either part of our company as employees, as directors, as suppliers, and we need to be transparent about where we want to go. So the fact that we are currently in a very, very tough economic environment means that our businesses are affected, which more than likely means we are personally affected, which then also means that your partners get affected. So by being transparent about where you want to go, talking to the stakeholders of your business about what you want to do, reminding them that there's going to be lots of work, there's going to be lots of tough times coming up, talking to your staff about changes in strategy, about, we are cutting salaries, we are changing business models, we're going to work you harder because we want to make sure the business gets out of this, we want to support you as a person. Those sort of discussions have to be made very, very clearly about where you want to go, because your staff and your stakeholders are a huge part of implementing that change and changing that direction. And then lastly, we've got to make sure that we create an environment of cooperation. So we've got to make sure that between all of our stakeholders, we have a way of communicating that, we have a way of collaborating together, because we can't do this on our own. And I don't mean that you can't define your own destiny. I just mean we have to always work with people. We've got to work with suppliers. We've got to negotiate with suppliers. We've got to negotiate with our customers. So making sure we are flexible and open to those sort of cooperative business models and cooperative strategies is a huge part of getting to that point we want to be. All right. That's it for today, guys. So you've all been very quiet. I'm hoping that it's been insightful. Any questions, or any comments, or anything you guys want to brainstorm? We've got about 10 minutes left. You can all unmute yourself, or you can put your hands up.
Hi, Damion. Anthony here. No, all good. It's just, once again, you're just reinforcing things and makes you eventually get moving. Because you know a lot of this stuff, and it's, you just gotta like execute. I don't know what the hell I'm waiting for, but I know what I need to do.
Well, at least you can be honest about that, Anthony.
Damion. So I think on this one, it's so important to understand that we actually need to make these plans moving forward when we're young. And I think, if you remember correctly as well, when we first started OptiGrowth, Kevin Suckley, who had a great business going many moons ago, and when we asked him the question, so what happens when you die or leave the business? What happens to the business? And he said it dies with him. And I think you remember well that 2 years ago he passed away, and he didn't have any succession planning, although we found out actually at the funeral that he had just appointed someone to take over the business from him. But today that business is gone. You know, his wife lost the business because she couldn't run it on his behalf. She actually lost her home due to not having him prepare for what should happen if he died. But I think we did get through to him because as I said, we found out at his funeral that he had actually brought some youngster on board to actually learn the ropes from him. So yeah, it's very important that we do this forward planning and forward thinking.
It's a very good point.
To protect what we've grown.
It's a very good point, because I mean, I've sort of insinuated it or put the concept across, but we forget that our business is actually an asset. We forget about the hidden value and the hidden wealth we have in our companies. And again, if something does happen to us, there's immediate wealth that can be generated by the people we leave behind or by the people we're handing it over to. And if we don't think about that succession or that exit plan of ours, the chances are the business dies and you lose all that wealth and that effort and that commitment you put into a company that becomes essentially worthless. So good point, Barbara. Yeah. Anybody else have any comments or questions? All right. If there's no more questions, guys, then I'm gonna close out the webinar. Thank you for joining us. I hope it was insightful. I hope you guys learned one or two more things. I hope it's given you some ideas of where to next for your personal growth, but also your business growth as well. And if you guys have any questions or you want to brainstorm or talk to someone about it, you're welcome to give Henk, myself, or Barbara a phone call. And we'll happily share some ideas and maybe do a bit of brainstorming with you as well. So thanks so much, guys, and I hope you guys enjoy your Thursday. It looks like rain tonight, so keep warm. Enjoy the fireplaces.